Welcome, boys and squirrels, to the Northern Outcast Outdoors podcast, The Outcast, your home for all things hunting, fishing, and ball busting related. Powered by Citizens Hunting Co., A&F Custom Calls, and Out on a Limb Manufacturing.
But we're rolling. Whenever you guys want to, if you want to bring in a little intro, Booer,
Yeah.
and then,
What episode is this? We ask this every single time.
hold on, let me look real quick. Sorry,
I think
we're so professional, so professional.
We'll do one of those cheesy voiceovers where Booer will just actually say some number and then
So
we'll just put it
this will
over.
be episode 6, season 2.
so. This is officially episode 6.
Season 2, episode 6.
We kind of had a little breaky break since I guess the archery 3D season wrapped up, and kind of getting back in here, trying to book a little content up here and keep her rolling. Today, I was pretty excited about the guest we got today.
Oh, yeah.
He, just to give a little list here, has his master's from OK State for zoology and fisheries, has worked for Lowrance, Terminator Lures, is currently working for Dynamic Sponsorships, one of the leading marketing and PR firms in the big world of professional fishing. More than 500 published short stories for Bassmaster and other various fishing outlets, and is on the voting committee for the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. A lost local boy in his own right.
Welcome back.
The people's champ, Alan McGuckin.
Man, it's good.
How the
It's good
hell
to
are
be
you?
on, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I, what a cool deal to reconnect with Western Pennsylvania. What a neat deal, man.
Oh, and you texted me the other day and you said, I think it was like, I haven't seen a 724 number in a long time. And I was like, what? It was a pretty cool connection.
Probably a
there.
good thing.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that either.
Yeah, my mom and dad have lived in the same home for 52 years, and I went to New Brighton High School down in Beaver County around Rochester, Monaca, that part of the world, the Ohio River, the Beaver River there. Yeah, so I graduated there, and then I went out to Juniata College. Juniata's out in central Pennsylvania near Lake Raystown, and that's kind of where I went there really for 3 reasons. I knew I wanted to go to a small school. I knew I didn't want to go terribly far from home, and I knew I wanted to study ecology and fisheries. So that kind of narrowed down my choices, and it was a really tough school. I kind of regret that a little bit because, man, I just, all we did was we studied. I roomed with 5 guys, and every one of them are doctors. So that kind of tells you how, that academically it was geared for pre-meds and pre-dental people. And yeah, it was intense, but continued on and followed my education and of course, and the University of Oklahoma in Norman, Oklahoma, and chose the University of Oklahoma. And that's really as simple as it is. That's how I ended up there. It was my education and career and dreams of being around this business that, as I told you yesterday, Braden, I'm literally the guy that packed up his dreams into a car and a truck, and my parents followed me 1,000 miles to Oklahoma, and the rest is history 30 years later.
I mean, the drive to really commit to going, balls deep into the deep end. I mean, that takes a lot just to do that, let alone actually carve your own little corner of the bass fishing industry out for yourself there.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the compliment. It's always been passion driven, man, and it still is today. Certainly I'm very aware that people think I have the coolest job in the world, and I would most days agree with that, but it doesn't it doesn't come without sacrifice, and the sacrifice is the lonely 13-hour drive to get up here to La Crosse, Wisconsin, where I'm covering the Elite Series event this weekend, or the 16-hour drives alone out to South Carolina to Lake Hartwell, or wherever I'm going. It's not so much once I'm on site that you deal with the loneliness and the long days and all the 4:30 a.m. wake-up calls. It's really just the getting there and the traveling back home that, when you're doing that stuff alone, if you don't have a passion, I return to that word, if you don't have a passion for this, you'll be burnt out in a hurry.
Oh, big time. Life on the road's not for, me and you were talking about it last night for a couple minutes. The life on the road, the gypsy lifestyles, it's a tough one even for people that are, in the game, not necessarily with just fishing, anything, musicians, guys that travel for work. I mean, when you're on the road that much, it's a different kind of mindset you got to be in.
Yeah, it is. And you learn to deal with it. I enjoy finding all the cool local eateries, and you if you don't embrace it, that's probably the best word. You learn to embrace it. It's not just go to a hotel, cover the fishing tournament, and go home. I try to enjoy myself when the work's done in the evening and find the cool eateries, or I always try to get a little bit of a fitness workout in the midday, basically between while the guys are out on the water competing. So I'll go find a cool park or a trail or something like that to get a little exercise. You can't just sit in a hotel room all day between morning launch and weigh.
No. So, I mean, for the people listening right now, I guess at the time of recording this, Guck is literally calling us in between day 2 blast off at La Crosse and when he's got to be back to kind of deal with all the guys back at the dock. But he kind of made time to call us. What's that like a day in the life at an event like that? Yeah,
that's a good question. And honestly, it's a really easy answer. And the reason it's an easy answer because, as I just spoke to, the fact you learn to embrace the road, you learn to embrace the time out here. And so I have a pretty solid regiment of how I handle each day out here. So you guys are obviously avid outdoorsmen. A lot of my wake up times are dictated by sunrise times. And that's because obviously our guys, they don't leave the dock until there's safe light. So depending on the time of the year, I'm going to get up anywhere from 3:45 in the morning. Those are the tough ones. That's usually in the month of June. Can you tell how long I've been doing this? June wake up times are usually, I remember covering a tournament, I think it was last year at Gunnersville, Alabama, and literally I got up every morning at 3:45 a.m. The guys were out. I mean, we had them sent off for blast off, all the pros, by like 6 a.m. sharp. And dude, by the time 10 a.m. rolled around, you felt like you had been up for 27 hours. You know what I mean?
That sounds like spring turkey season right there in a nutshell, my guy.
Right. Yeah. So to answer your question, get up at 3:30. That's extremely early. I would say the average wake up call out here is 4:30 a.m. And so I get my coffee in the hotel room or wherever I'm staying, and then I head to the dock. And I'm looking to meet up with certain pros that are tied to the brands I represent. We currently represent Toyota trucks, Costa sunglasses, eyewear, Yamaha outboards, and we do a little work for Carhartt as well. So all the pros that I work with are tied to those brands. So I hit the dock in the pre-dawn, and I start gathering content, basically. And it can be something as simple as a 30-second video hit for Team Toyota's social sites, or it could be an interview and a photograph so that I can then go back to the room and write a 400 or 500 word feature story. So that's once I've gathered content at the dock and the guys start their day, whether it's a practice day or a competition day, then I come back to the hotel, and that's generally when I'm working on morning content, is about this time of the day. And I'll do a short story, typically run a photo through Photoshop to make sure I've got a great photo to support the story. And then I send that same story out to about 5 or 6 very popular bass fishing websites. So Bassmaster, for example, Bass Fan, Bass Resource out of Washington State in the Pacific Northwest, anglerschannel.com, Bass 365. So all those are very popular bass fishing websites, consumer sites, and they're all happy to have the content. And so they'll post it pretty much immediately. And then that short story will live throughout the day. I'll go back around noon and I catalog all that, do a screen grab and make sure I've cataloged all that PR exposure, because obviously I am obligated to produce. It's not all fun and games. So after I've cataloged the story, then usually I'll go get a workout in for a half hour, an hour, grab a 20 or 30-minute nap, grab a shower, and head to weigh-in. And so weigh-ins generally, obviously, from about 3 in the afternoon till 6, come back after weigh-in. And generally my evenings are when I'm working on social media content, not just for my clients, such as Yamaha and Toyota, Costa, but also I'll give all the content that I get at weigh-in, so photos and interviews. I will share that with the pros. So after they're done weighing in, they get back to wherever they're staying and crack a beer and grab a shower, and then they're often getting content directly from me to post to their social media channel. So repetitive here, but content is king. And in this world that we live in, it's like feeding a hungry monster, right? What was fresh and new at 10 o'clock this morning is old and done by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's time to produce more fresh content. So my evenings are generally tied around the distribution of content to the pros and the clients, and then I'll go get something to eat, and I'm generally in bed by 9:30 because the cycle starts all over the next morning at 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah. That's actually something interesting that the three of us always kind of talk about, is having regular content. I mean, you do it day after day. We struggle. I mean, obviously we work other jobs and try to do the same thing, on a much more limited scale. It's people's attention spans have like gone to almost nothing with cell phones and social media. I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like you said, it just gets stale after a couple hours. You got to keep feeding the monster. And I think that's actually a very good way to put it.
Yeah. And that brings a little bit of job security in my career, but it's also a challenge. The real challenge is just bringing good creativity to the landscape of what I do. I mean, when you're on the hook to do it, my dad was a retired plumber and steam fitter. He was a blue collar construction guy. And, it's neat to have him with me, he and Mom on the road with me every now and then. They've attended events at Lake Oneida, New York. They've been to Cayuga, New York, all stuff around your region, guys. So when I'm up that way, I'll try to include them. And my dad, the retired steam fitter, said one time, as he just watched me go about my day, we were at Cayuga, New York, the Finger Lakes, and he said, "Bud, I don't know how the hell you come up with new ideas every single morning." And I said, "Well, Dad, that's a challenge. That's the challenge of what I do. That's the stuff that I roll over in bed sometimes at 2 o'clock in the morning and think, what pro am I going to target first this morning? Who did I work with yesterday? Who have I not worked with in a while? And then the big question, what the heck are we going to talk about?" Right? And I love the fact that my employer and my clients give me creative freedom, right? The thing that I just can't hardly deal with or stand is, we have something in the business called editorial calendars. And essentially it's exactly what it sounds like. Someone lays out a month ahead or even 2 months ahead of, here's what we want you to write about the second week of June. Well, I hate that. I hate editorial calendars because it so limits your creativity, because I have certainly learned that 27 years in the business, 16 years out here on tour, the best stories, the best storytelling is spawned out of generally always something spontaneous that I didn't count on when I left the hotel for the dock that morning. It's a conversation with a pro who tells me something that you're like, man, there it is. That's super intriguing and that's really cool. But I don't plan for that stuff, and I certainly don't map it out on an editorial calendar a week or a month or 2 months in advance.
Oh, for sure.
A lot of that creativity comes out of just organic encounters with people.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we have a saying in the business, it's all about being here, right? You can't do what I do, and I don't think you can do any facet of what I do very well if you're not on site. You have to have that human interaction with the Brandon Lesters and the Gerald Swindles and the Matt Aries and the Kevin Van Dams of the world. You have to have a rapport with those guys. You got to be able to look them in the eyes and be face to face to hear the story, see the emotion, and that's where great content comes from, in my opinion.
It seems less fake. Like, it feels like, not scripted. You can always tell when someone's, sort of scripted or something like that. I mean, it really shows, I think.
Yep.
And I don't like stuff like that either.
Yeah, but in the same sense too, though, I mean, you think about it, when you go day by day like that and you don't really have that calendar, I mean, there's two different kind of mindsets. There's the people that have to be planned out, 4 months in advance to be productive.
Yeah, that's true too.
And then there's people that can take it day by day, week by week, but it adds a lot of stress as well. That constant, what am I going to do next? What can I get next? That's a lot of stress added to the position as well.
Yep, that's the cause of me turning over in bed at 2 o'clock in the morning. A lot in the hotel room. Yeah.
Speaking of that, though, Brandon Polnick, we were actually talking about this right before you called in. We were talking about that freaking bass he caught underneath the bridge doing a figure eight, which the dude can't miss this year, which is insane. And that was just like another,
Awesome to see.
Are you kidding me? But his social media, his YouTube channel is like top notch. I mean, Scott Martin was probably one of the first ones to like really dive into like the whole YouTube realm, but he is absolutely killing it on like every level, I feel like, over the last couple of years, especially.
Yeah, so I think you're right on all counts. And I think the world of Brandon. Got a bear hug from his grandpa yesterday, actually, way in. His family, he's got such a neat family. You know, he's from Idaho, and Idaho's a long way from everything we seem to do in this sport. And his family, when he's at when he's got something big on the line, like he does this weekend with the Angler of the Year title, man, they just show up and show out, and they're such neat people. But they travel. They'll travel 22 hours, 24 hours to come see him, and they follow him around the lake. They ping his cell phone, so they always know where he's at on the water, and they'll just crawl out of the woods and be standing on the shoreline.
That's awesome.
It's really cool. But yeah, back to what you said about it. First of all, Brandon is a very, very driven individual. A lot of people don't know this, but he's actually a 2-time state champion high school wrestler. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so if you know any wrestlers, or if you were a former wrestler, you know those cats are wired just a little bit different.
Unfortunately, we do know one a little too well, actually. The missing member of the group today.
So that kind of tells you how he's wired from the get-go. And it's funny because when you're around him, he's really, really laid back. He's kind of a flatliner emotionally. He doesn't ever get crazy wired up. You know, when you talk to Brandon, he's always very, very even keel no matter what's going on. But the reality of it is he's a very driven cat. And I've been around the sport long enough, that I had a personal relationship with guys like Ken Cook and Gary Klein. Those were kind of my mentors and fishing heroes. And I see a lot of the Ken Cook, Gary Klein mindset in Brandon, even though, he's obviously significantly younger than those guys.
Yeah.
He's got a little bit of an old soul with that young drive. He's the kind of guy that, I know you guys will appreciate this, he enjoys being off the grid in the off season and climbing mountains to kill elk.
Oh, right? Yeah.
So he's just a special cat. But yeah, he was smart enough to be one of the early adopters of social media, period, whether it was Instagram, certainly YouTube. And kudos to him, man. What a lot of people don't realize is he invested in that in the truest sense of the word, real money. And what I mean by that is he was one of the first to figure out, hey, I can't generate, here we use this word again, I can't generate great fresh content and catch fish all at the same time. Like, I've got to go pay somebody real money to come film all this. So he hired a guy named Kyle. Kyle is a wonderful dude. He is just a cool cat. He lives most of the summer on a sailboat up there in Idaho. He'll twist off in the off season and go visit foreign countries by himself. He's just a neat dude. Funny, humble, and insanely talented as a videographer and editor. So Kyle travels with Brandon and Tiffany. Tiffany's Brandon's wife, obviously, and literally lives with them on the road. I mean, they have a big fifth wheel, and they live together like college kids, right? And
awesome.
Kyle is nonstop. This is, man, I hope I'm illustrating this the way that it really is. When I say nonstop, shooting content all the time. I mean, he's shooting content in the pre-dawn at 5:30 in the morning. He's shooting content at every weigh-in. He's a fixture out here, kind of like myself and this other band of gypsies. I mean, he's everywhere we go. And that results, and then he takes it back, after supper, and he edits half the night.
Yeah.
So his work ethic and his skill level for what he does is kind of on par with Brandon and what he does. And it's led to tremendously quality content that you're referencing and bragging on, deservedly so. And Scott Martin does the same thing. It's one of those deals. You can't be jealous of those guys. You can't be hateful about it because they're putting in the work. Scott Martin I think he's got 2 or 3 people out here that follow him around. When I say follow, I mean, they stay in the same rental house or hotel. And I mean, they're capturing him drinking coffee in the morning. On base, and that's something we never saw out here 10 years ago.
No, that's what's crazy about. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, Brandon and Scott were definitely the early adopters of that.
Oh, yeah. Scott was kind of a rare case coming from the FLW. I mean, obviously, dudes that are like really into fishing know about the FLW, but most guys probably couldn't name you 10 guys in the FLW right now, but everybody that follows, at least the Bass Elite guys or the MLF guys knew about Scott Martin before he kind of made the jump because of that, because he was just everywhere. Like he was on everything, everywhere, all the time, not even doing like serious fishing videos. Like he had a buddy who's like, hey, check out my sound system I just put in my boat. Just anything, honestly, like you said, just follow him everywhere. Yeah. And that was kind of cool. And that was, I guess like not to bring up the Guggen squad either, but like those kids kind of did the same thing, with that whole, I guess not revolution wouldn't be the right word to use, but kind of that like.
Oh, it really was.
Yeah. But, they kind of just did the same thing more or less now. It's like kind of just like, hey, this is what I do today. Or, people want to watch that shit.
Bringing in that influx of like actual influencers to get that brand recognition out there.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's pretty wild because, we're all millennials. So like our generation, like my earliest memories of like, I guess more professional fishing was, watching Bill dance on Sundays with my dad. But I remember in high school when Mike Iaconelli won his first classic and they had him on the Sports Center top 10 when he caught that last fish and was just like going ballistic on his boat deck. And I was like, holy shit, there's pro fishing. Like I remember that like being like, I don't know, I was like 12 or 13, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
2003.
Yeah. I'm like, this is pretty wild. I'm like, oh, it's on SportsCenter. I catch bass. That's cool. And I remember like it evolving, over the last couple of years, like them having the live streams of the elite events. Like that was cool as hell, being able to just get on my phone and watch it. And it kind of made it more for the people. You know what I mean? You don't have to pay nothing to watch those on their website or anything like that. I think that's really awesome.
It is. And as long as I've been in this, man, I'm still addicted to that kind of stuff, just like you guys. And, my girlfriend is an elementary school principal, and she's got Bassmaster Live running on her desk while she's trying to run an elementary school. And I love that, man. And she was totally new to the sport when we started dating a year and a half ago. And that is such the magic of our sport, is seeing somebody like her, a female elementary school principal that was not into our sport. Okay. Her son fished some tournaments, but it was kind of a passive deal. And yet here she is a year and a half later with Bassmaster Live running nonstop on her deck at school and really has a legit, passion for fishing with me. And she's completely amateur, at this point. She loves it. And that's the magic of our sport. You expose somebody to it correctly, and it does. It has a magnetic quality about it, man. And whether that's watching Bassmaster Live, you're not participating, you're watching, or you really adopt a love for going out there on Saturday morning and trying to catch one. And I love seeing the evolution in somebody like her that came from not knowing it, wasn't on her radar, was not a part of her life, where now she's consuming content or participating a significant portion of her week every week.
Yeah, I saw you posted a picture of her catching a fish a couple days ago, or maybe a couple weeks ago. I can't remember.
Yeah. So I said she caught her first 2 bass of her life.
Wow.
I lost track. 2 Sundays ago before I left them up here. Anyhow, I said the first one was tiny that day, and the second one was the size of a first grader.
Well, that's more than I can say for myself lately.
She came unspooled, fellas. Trust me. And that was so cool to watch that. That's the stuff you cannot fake, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's born into us. It's primal. Some of us have it. Some of us really don't, or we don't care. And then there's people like us that it's just part of our DNA. And she's discovering in the middle of her life that she's got that too, and didn't even realize it, purely because no one had ever really exposed her to it or invited her to truly participate,
Yeah, our buddy Seaburn always says that he absolutely loves it when Boer here catches a fish, because that look on his face is absolutely
It's the first
priceless.
fish face every time.
Every single time he catches a fish, it's that first fish face, and it's phenomenal. Yeah, you got to have that passion, that love for it. But you mentioned something pretty interesting I wanted to touch on as well, because you talked about having that first good experience whenever you're getting somebody into the sport of fishing. From your perspective, somebody that may want to get, a significant other or a friend or family into fishing the right way, do you have a suggestion on how they can go about, making that experience good for them, whether it's using live bait or, lures or whatever it is? I mean, what do you think is the easiest way to kind of dip your toes in and get people interested in it?
Well, I think there's two guiding lights to that. I think simplicity and success. So simplicity is, don't try to take them out there to flooded bushes with a 3.5 inch. Like, that's next level stuff that Guck and people that have been doing this that's not how you do it, right? That's not simple. That's very technical. That takes years of practice. So simplicity, obviously common sense. Yeah, could be live bait under a bobber, could be a spinning reel and just casting around a 3.5 inch swim bait, or something simple like a lipless crankbait, a rattle trap. Simplicity. It's not about trying to fish like Brandon Polinick on the first outing, right? Because they say there is a skill set involved in our sport, and people that are new to it, I don't think they realize how much skill is involved, for those of us that are hardcore avid. So simplicity. Spinning reels are a great way to go. I don't know that I'm a huge fan of starting people with spin cast stuff like that. Spin cast is great for kids, right? Because it eliminates a lot of messes. I'm talking push button, Zebcos. Right? Obviously an iconic place in our sport, but I'm not sure that I like starting adults there, because here's why. Because that kind of tackle, those rods and reels, let's be honest, are pretty limiting in what you can do. So I like, in the case of Sherry, my girlfriend, I've started her with spinning tackle, open face stuff, because she can do a lot of stuff with that and grow quicker with her techniques than she could if I just handed her a Zebco rod and reel, and then I feel like I'd be limiting her ability to grow in the sport. So kids, you can't argue with a Zebco push button reel and live bait under a bobber. But I think if you're introducing an adult to the sport, I think spinning tackle is a great way to go, but keep it simple. It's lures they can cast, like a 1/4 ounce rattle trap, or Sherry caught her big one on a DT6 crankbait, because spinning tackle can handle that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then success, the second part of that equation. If you really want to be successful at getting somebody into the sport and growing their love for the sport, they have to be successful. And so, well, how do you help a beginner succeed? Well, you got to put them around fish they can catch, right? So I took Sherry to a small body of water, for example, that is frankly overcrowded with bass in an unhealthy way. We're getting into my fisheries here. It's got too many fish in it. It's got too many hungry mouths and not near enough groceries, if you will. Yeah. But the good news is they bite, right? They're fairly easy to catch because they're hungry.
Oh, they're super aggressive.
Yeah, super aggressive. Excuse me. So put them around fish that they can catch, whether that's in an overcrowded farm pond, or you live in my part of the world and you've got white bass that are schooling in the springtime and they're easy to catch. Or maybe you're just catching panfish, but make sure beginning anglers don't care about, they're not generally setting out to catch a 9-pound largemouth or a 5-pound smallmouth or a trophy, right? They just want to be successful. They just want to catch something. And so those are the two key pieces of advice I have for those of us that are in the sport and want to successfully introduce somebody else. That's keep it simple, tackle, technique, and then focus on making sure they're successful. And all that successful really equates to is getting a bite, catching fish. And it shouldn't be trophy fish on the first, second, or third outing.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, just feeling the tug on the line the first time, you're like, holy shit, it worked. Like, just seeing that look on people's faces, like, this thing works. And it can be something as simple as fishing for carp off the bank. You take a beginning angler and they catch a 25-inch carp. Oh, that'll get them jacked up. That'll get anybody jacked up.
So much fun.
Right. Yeah. So, it's certainly not flipping flooded bushes in the springtime,
Man, you can almost tell that you grew up in Western Pennsylvania because everything that you're mentioning is my childhood growing up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sick to relate that with the carp and just catching fish early on with bobber. And, we always were on spinning tackle, but since I've had to grow up and fish more often because these guys like fishing a lot more than I do, I've gone to more of a bait cast system and whatnot. But learning that was a whole new endeavor in itself. And a lot of guys around here, especially family of mine that grew up on that spin, they just can't get away from it. And I wonder how you would think like a good kind of transition away from that to get them to use those bait casters and trust them. Because I know that process for me, I almost threw it in the lake a couple times when I first started.
But now you won't go back, though.
No, I mean, now.
That's the thing. Once you finally hit that
done.
point, it's like, well, this is superior in just about every way, other than if you're throwing something finesse or smaller. Obviously, you want the spin tackle.
Yeah.
No, your question's a real one. And that's one of the bigger challenges, I think, in bass fishing is learning conventional reels, bait casting reels. It's not easy, period. It's not. It takes practice. And I think that, it just has to become a mindset. And that mindset is born out of the fact that, hey, these are tools. These are tools. And it's like I've told my dad several times on his visits to Oklahoma, by my nature, guys, I'm a shallow water guy. My favorite way to catch a bass is pitch into visible flooded habitat, whether that's lay down trees or that's flooded bushes, or that's my deal. Well, my dad is limited in that he can't pitch. He's never learned the art of an underhanded pitch to close target. And so, but he throws a bait cast really well. He does very well if I hand him a chatter bait or a rattle trap or something a spinner bait, something that he can just make an overhand cast with. So I think it's one of those deals, and it'll become this with my girl Sherry. At some point, she's either going to have to make up her mind that, I want to fish like Guck fishes and have all those techniques in my arsenal, or I don't care that much to learn all that, because it's like anything else in this life, whether you're playing golf or an archery hunter or whatever, you have to put the time in to learn all the techniques. If you're a golfer, to learn all the clubs. If you're an archery hunter, obviously you got to shoot often and practice a lot, right? In our sport's no different. If you want to be advanced in the sport and you want to be able to use all the tools that are available to us, you have to learn how to use a bait caster. How do you learn how to use a bait caster? Time and effort and a lot of practice. I can remember standing in my third floor apartment in Norman, Oklahoma as a grad student. And at that point, I was pretty entrenched in some high-level tournaments, as well as working on my master's. I was fishing red man tournaments against the best guys in the state, the region. Some of those guys went on to be full-time pros. Jason Christie, excuse me, but Edwin Evers was another one that took a lot of my money back then. But I can remember standing in the third floor apartment at the University of Oklahoma and pitching from the kitchen out into the living room to a small cup as my target, and just wearing my roommate out like, what a weirdo, right? Yeah. My deal was, I can't ever be good enough at this. I got to practice, because at that point, my life obviously had moved across the country from Western Pennsylvania to Norman. I was saturated in not only my education at that point, but also in pretty high-level tournament fishing. And I knew that if I was going to beat those guys, I had to be equally as good as they were technique-wise. And so I practiced. As goofy as that sounds, I pitched, and I practiced pitching with a bait casting rod and reel inside an apartment to where I could literally hit that small target every time. And to this day, that is a technique that I utilize just about every time I'm on the water.
The pitch, it's funny you say that, is like probably one of the most underrated, more difficult. It doesn't sound difficult. You're throwing 10 to 15 feet, if that. But like anybody can bomb cast, 50 yards or whatever it is. But you give them that 7.3 rod and you're like, all right, hit that bush 8 feet over there.
Yeah. It's all about efficiency and accuracy at that point.
It's like just out of that flipping range, and you kind of got to make it. Like I struggle sometimes too, and I've been using a bait caster since I was in I think 8 or 9 years old. And I mean, back then they were a lot less forgiving than they are now. So,
right.
And that's what's funny too, is like if I gave anybody Sabelli's pretty good with a bait caster at this point. If I gave him my rod and reel, he wouldn't be able to use it because I have everything turned off completely, because that's how I grew up using, round reels and, old school tackle that didn't have brakes, didn't have anything, it was all your thumb. And like the new ones now, like I can tell when it's turned up even a little bit, I'm missing like 5 feet off my cast when I throw that. Like I can tell like when it's not, to my stuff. But even still now, you get me in that 10 to 15 range, and I would say my accuracy is like 80%, and I've been doing it for a pretty damn long time.
Yeah, so bait casting reels are I mean, they're parallel to archery hunting. One minuscule adjustment, right, changes everything.
Yes.
People that are listening need to know that. Most every bait casting reel features 3 primary adjustments. You've got your star drag that determines how easily a fish can pull line away from your reel. So you got your drag, and then you've got generally a fine adjustment knob, and you've got your larger adjustment, right? Your external cast control. So all those things, I don't want to scare anybody, but just so people are aware, you have to learn to utilize all that. That it's like learning how to use a bow if you're going to start archery hunting. You need to know what every adjustment results in. And bait casting reels are highly, highly engineered products. I mean, I've represented quantum rods and reels for 9 years, and I worked hand in hand with their engineers. They were engineers. They weren't pro fishermen.
Yeah.
They were college-educated engineers designing bait casting reels. So it's a fine piece of equipment, and if you're going to be good with one, you have to have the patience. Don't go into it with a bad attitude that, I'm just going to have a bunch of backlashes. Well, you may, but if you want to learn how to use that tool, you'll learn how to use that tool, right? And you'll learn what every one of those knobs does and how it affects your cast and your drag. And, and I make those adjustments every day I'm on the water. It's not like after all these years, I've just got one setting and I ride that all year.
No.
Yeah, it's all situational.
Oh, yeah, especially for guys like us that, don't have a boat that can hold, 20 rods or the money to buy 20 different setups. If you're putting on, if you're going from a jig to, a hard bait or something like that, I mean, you do have to adjust your reel a little bit.
Yeah, and I would say, and that's a great segue into another point I would offer is we all have to save up and buy our first rod and reel, right? But really, as you become more avid in the sport, I don't mean a hardcore tournament guy, but I mean somebody that's going somewhat frequently. I tell people all the time, and here I go with this golf reference again, but you can't play a round of golf with one club, right? And fishing, bass fishing especially, is the same way. People that know nothing about the sport walk into my garage and look at the front deck of my Ranger, or they see all the rods in the corner.
They think we're complete degenerates.
Yeah,
probably get lightheaded.
God, dude, I've never seen so many rods in my life. I'm like, well, it's what I do, right? That's who I am. And the point is, I utilize every one of those rods and reels throughout most of my days on the water. Now, ideally, you get on one bite, you can ride that combo, that lure, that pattern all day. That's what we all strive for.
Yeah.
But in putting the pieces of the bass fishing puzzle together, it takes more than one rod and reel. And so I would tell people, save up and get your first one. But the ugly reality of it is, there's really not a rod and reel that does every single thing in our sport. No. It just doesn't really exist. We can get close, but it's less than ideal. So I tell people, you really need to expect to at least be able to try to acquire 2 at a minimum, but ideally 3 rod and reel combos to really get into the game, because there's just too many techniques that are productive, proven, and successful. And unfortunately, they don't all pair well with one rod and reel. It takes at least 2, typically 3, whatever, maybe 4 if you're a real idiot like me, 14 of them.
I'm not far behind you, my friend.
Yeah. But those are just the realities. I don't like to kid people on, I'll pick you out one rod and reel and you'll be good to go. Now, well, you will for a while with certain techniques, but if you really want to learn the sport, it's kind of like where Sherry's at right now. Like, she can do certain things with a spinning rod and do a lot of things with it, actually, and be successful. But there will come a time soon when, I guarantee you this is going to happen because she fishes with me so much, she's going to say, Dave, I want you to teach me how to pitch. Well, here we go. That's, and I hope that day comes, but I'm just trying to illustrate that as all of us evolve in the sport, we have to learn the techniques. We have to learn all the different reels out there in the sport, and we have to learn what to pair with each. I'll give you an example of that. One of my best friends, most treasured friends in the world, is a record label executive in Nashville, and just a neat guy, just kind of a God sent to my life. It's crazy how similar his life and mine are. He grew up in Kentucky, but he is in country music for a living, works with people very closely like Chris Stapleton, and yet loves the outdoors, loves to fish and hunt. And I'm much the same but opposite. I make my living in fishing and have an absolute passion for country music. I'm a lyrics junkie. I need to know who wrote the song, who co-wrote the song. Anyhow, he and I formed a friendship. And he called me on the phone, I guess it's been 6 weeks ago. And he's got a teenage boy, football player, big kid, but he loves to hunt and fish with his dad. And he said, brother, I need your advice. And I said, all right, anything. What do you need? He's like, we're out here on the porch, and we got all of our rods and reels laid out, and I'm going to read you the models, and you tell us what lure we need to be fishing with that model, that rod, that reel. What lure does that rod and reel get? What lure does that rod and reel get?
Man.
And, dude, I love that, right? Because, number one, at least he's wise enough to realize these are tools.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then it was cool that he called on me, to help him learn how to use those tools. And that's kind of like, that's what I wish more people would do is realize, hey, there's a little bit of a science to this, and I need to understand that science if I want to be successful.
Are you available for like 15 minutes after this call? I'm going to run out into the garage.
Go get the
I'll stay
arsenal.
on the line with you.
Wow.
Because in all reality, in all honesty, this is the part of fishing where I struggle the most is knowing, okay, where do I even find the resources to realize, like, what do I do with this combination compared to this combination compared to this combination? Because I have 5 different rods and reel combos out there. And to be honest, I just grab whichever ones I like the best and I go fishing.
And this is why I don't bring him with me most of the time.
And I throw everything on anything, and
We just
it
shake
doesn't
our heads
matter,
when we're
right? So, I mean, really, where are the resources? Where can I go and say, okay, I know that there are better uses for each one of these rod and reel combos. Where do I go to find, a Guck to help me figure out
Literally
what I
have
need?
my phone number.
Yeah, but I'm saying without like you involved, if I really want to go and do this on my own.
Yeah, if you don't have a great mentor, and honestly, I really didn't myself. My dad took me fishing. We fished for carp on the banks of the Beaver River where it drains into the Ohio down there around New Brighton and
Big old
Rochester.
flatheads down there too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but my dad is not a knowledgeable, skilled angler. He loves to go, but so I didn't have a mentor. So where does a guy like me, a kid like me, find that information?
Exactly.
And this is really welcome to the world that I work in, right? So I think unfortunately there's a lot of a cynical perspective that these pros are always trying to sell you something. Well, in part, that's their job. They pay their light bill with sponsors, so of course they're going to talk about those products. But the reality, the good news is these guys are the best in the world at what they do. So if I wanted to find the perfect drop shot rod and reel, I would probably start Googling somebody's name like Brandon Polnick, and somewhere out there he's going to tell you exactly what he fishes a drop shot on. He's going to tell you.
Yeah.
He's not going to tell you the brand, right? He's not going to say I use a Daiwa spinning reel. He's going to give you the exact model of that reel. He's going to give you somewhere out there. He's going to, in an interview on the Googler, he's mentioned exactly the exact rod model that he uses for drop shotting, right? So that's the answer to your question. If you don't have a mentor, a Guck in your life, or a dad that's an avid angler, whatever, man, you take advantage of Google and start whatever technique it is. If I was wanting to become proficient with deep crankbait, I would probably right now Google Brandon Lester deep cranking. Certainly legendary David Fritz.
Yeah.
Guys who do that stuff a lot are talking out there in stories with guys like me about exactly what they use. I remember doing that as a kid. Now we didn't have. God, this sounds horrible. We didn't have the internet when I was a kid, boys. But anyhow,
I mean, really, we sort of didn't either.
Yeah,
to be completely fair, we kind of were the test subjects of this
We
whole
were that
social
transitional
experiment
period,
going on.
yeah.
So, but I can remember looking to Denny Brower and Daiwa back then would run ads with the exact reel and rod model that Denny flipped with, or Gary Klein in what rod and reel he threw crankbaits on, or whatever it was. And then as a kid, I remember going, "That's the exact reel I want to save up for and buy."
Yeah.
And I think it's the same today. The only thing that's better or different is you got a lot more information out there at your fingertips.
Oh, an
You tap
insane
on the
amount of
keyboard.
information.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a double-edged sword. I know I said that earlier too, but like if a guy, like say in your region, is talking about fishing, a hard bottom lake out there, yeah, in this situation I would blah 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 blah. Well, over here in Western PA, just about everything's soft, silty bottom, man-made reservoir, and it's kind of a easy way to get frustrated, because I remember being younger and watching Kevin Van Dam throwing a freaking jerkbait. It's like, I'm going to throw a jerkbait everywhere because he catches fish. Well, it don't work like that either, too, in a situational, I guess, level.
Right. No, there's not one lure, and it doesn't work everywhere. But this is crazy, but the cool thing about the guys who are the best in the world in our sport is, in social media, you could literally private message probably 50 out of 100 of these guys, and they would literally respond to you one-on-one. I think I would feel in good faith in saying you could send 50 out of 100 of these guys, a kid could, and say, could you please tell me the exact model of the rod and reel that you use for drop shots or you use for chatterbaits? Pick a pro. If they're good enough to fish the Elite Series, for example, or the Bass Pro Tour with MLF, they're certainly qualified to give you a good answer, an educated answer. And the vast majority of these cats, at least half of them, would literally answer anybody that's seeking that information directly. You couldn't do that when I was a kid.
No.
There was no way to contact Gary Klein or Ken Cook directly. You know what I mean? But you can now.
I mean, that's how we got a hold of you. I got a hold of you was on Instagram.
Exactly. Didn't know you from Adam, and here we are. And that's really cool, man.
It really kind of is. And then find out you're a lost Western PA boy too, on top of that.
Yeah. Yep. For 30 years, I've been trying to figure out how I got to Oklahoma. Yep.
Something, I guess, kind of in the same vein you mentioned yesterday when we talked on the phone is you went to, a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, you went to this lake that you'd never been to before. You did some research. You went out there and you did well. And that's, I think, in the evolution, at least for, amateurs like us, that, my new thing has been going to new places or crossing different species, not just bass, off the list of things I haven't caught. And I was on this mission to catch a bowfin this year. And I found this body of water, did research, and then, adjusted out there. Like, oh, they don't like this. Or they have very good eyes. I should be using fluorocarbon or things like that. The little sciencey kind of real game planning aspects of it really interest me now more than it did before. Like, it's not just catching the fish. It's like going to this new place completely.
We simply call that figuring them out.
Yes. And that's, I think, kind of the
evolution.
It's the natural evolution, I feel like. And that's the challenge I've been really enjoying over the last couple of years, is going to new fisheries and things like that, and, learning, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's like anything else in the outdoors. You start in one level, and if you're really passionate about it and you love it, you just continue to strive to go to the next level and the next level, whatever that is for you. But everybody kind of finds what's their route or their path throughout the sport. Whether it's just me, that I just want to go out and catch big bass, that's what I'm going to do. But, Boer has a whole different mindset that now all of a sudden it just comes to him, well, you know what? I want to go chase species. And it's the same, whether you're hunting deer, turkey, whatever you're doing in life, it seems like everybody progresses differently.
Yeah, we start off, we just want to see a deer. Then we want to shoot our first deer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then it's somewhere we I don't want to say trophy hunters, but we evolve, as you just said. And then as we decide that we want to shoot a trophy buck, with that comes the realization that, trophy bucks are wired a little different than that average year and a half, 2.5-year-old, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And so then that becomes, you start living with that particular deer. When does he get up in the morning, and where does he go eat? When does he return from eating? And where does he bed? Then that starts the science of the sport. That's the figuring them out part of deer hunting, right? In which you're doing the work. You're putting in the research. You're doing your homework. You're thinking about it. Go ahead. You're slightly obsessed.
But obsession's the word. Yeah, you slip into obsession.
Yeah, you slip into obsession.
Hopefully.
Sometimes not so healthy.
No.
I think it is, man. I think you know why I think it's healthy, as long as you're not like wrecking your marriage and your job and all that, obviously.
Right.
I think it's good to have passion in this life. I love being surrounded by people who love what they do. I mentioned my buddy in the music business in Nashville. That guy loves lyrics, and he loves music, and he loves artists like we love the outdoors. And I love being around people that are passionate. And if your passion is trying to kill a trophy deer, I admire that. I think it's cool, and you're right. There is an absolute evolution that takes place among us as outdoorsmen. Most of us, not all of us, but that strive to experience new things, experience new lakes, kill a bigger deer, whatever it is. And I love and embrace that process. I've been bass fishing now. This is hard to believe, but a little over 30 years, more like 35 years. And yet 2 weeks ago, as you referenced, I figured out a lake not far from my home in Oklahoma that I had never seen before and did well, as you said. Man, that's the ultimate reward. I mean, I was jacked, that never gets old. That never gets old. But that all started with a lot of map study and a lot of Google Earth study and finding channel swings and then the day I got on the water, looking at my sonar immediately and determining how deep thermocline was and comparing that. I mean, that's next level stuff, right? But that's what I do. It's what I love to do, and what I'm happy to share with other people that want to learn the sport.
Yeah, I mean, in reality, it's almost a slap in the face to someone that when you talk about fishing and you talk about the skill set of fishing, and someone might tell you, well, I can just throw a minnow on the bobber and catch just as many bass or just as big a bass as you can. And that comment in itself is like, you're missing the point. You're really missing the point. I mean, the point here is that as I progress and want to do better things with fishing and get better at fishing, there really comes a entire new study, like you're saying, with maps and channels and all of this thing that, me more as a hunter, I've done this with wind and different things, figure out deer, but I've never taken fishing to that level. And,
right.
And in reality, maybe a lot of people don't even realize that you can go into a point where you actually can study maps and figure out where you're going to catch fish the night before at new places. And those experiences is what drives you for that passion and really enjoyment out of anything that you do. Whether it's us traveling to Oklahoma to hunt turkey 2 years ago because it's something totally different species of turkey. And, it's something that we do because we love this, but in the same sense, that new challenge and trying to figure out something totally different than what you're used to and getting out of that comfort zone is what I love. And bringing that back to fishing, there's a lot for me to learn and to experience, but in the same sense, these guys are obviously going to keep kicking me in the ass until I do it, but I'm starting to enjoy it. I came from someone like you said, fishing carp off the bank or, fish and maybe bass or whatever off a live bait. And then the progression to lures. Now I'm kayak fishing. It's just, and it came from a simple kayak bass fishing tournament that I joined for fun with friends, other podcasters. And, that's brought me above and beyond in this sport. And it's actually really enjoyable. As much as I hate to say it. It hurts me.
We got him.
I don't need another all-in passion.
Got you right where we want you.
Yeah. No, the kayak segment of the outdoors is arguably the fastest growing segment of all outdoors. I mean, when you get down to the nitty-gritty and start looking at, where are sales taking place in the outdoor industry, kayaks and everything related to kayaks has just been an explosive trend the last 10, 12 years. And it's cool. It's cool because I believe, as somebody who's been blessed to make a living in this sport, I believe we talked about getting people into the sport. I believe that the whole kayaking movement has brought people into fishing that may otherwise have never got into our sport. And that's a good thing.
Oh, I agree. Ike Anelli actually did quite a big service to the kayak industry, especially with his videos and his I guess it's on his property, that pond he has, when he brings his kids back there and their Hobies and they just are crushing pickerel back there in the middle of winter. I remember, what was that, 5-6 years ago probably, when that really kicked in with him. And then, the next thing you know, everybody had to have a Hobie kayak.
Yeah. Edwin Evers has been doing something similar too on his channel.
Yeah. He's a cool dude too. We should try to get him on.
Yeah. You should, man. He lives about 20 miles from me.
Oh, no kidding.
Nice.
Yeah.
One of our buddies that we're friends with on social media knows him personally. He's from Alabama, though. I think they fish together, or their dads know each other somehow, or there's some strange connection. But Edwin Evers has popped up a few times over the years. It's kind of a
target
sign.
acquired.
Yeah, it never. People are good people in this business, thank God, and it never hurts. You guys doing this podcast, man. I wouldn't ever be embarrassed or afraid to at least reach out to people that you want on. I mean, most of them, if they can make it fit their schedule. The biggest challenge you face in getting professional anglers on is the travel.
Oh yeah.
These guys are committed. Well, like right now, they're on a 2-week run. Matt Airy won't even see his family for, I think he said 18 days.
Jeez.
But so sometimes it's intense in terms of travel and time and dark to dark on the water. But yeah, man, a little bit of industry wisdom. Don't ever be embarrassed or afraid to reach out to. If a guy doesn't respond to you, he doesn't respond to you. But there's so many good people in this business that you can reach out to and ask to be on. For sure. Don't hesitate on that would be my wisdom there.
Oh, we've definitely learned that. Our, I guess, half of the podcast has not been around as long as Chucky, but I mean, he's wrangled some big fish in his own right, so to speak.
Where did you guys turkey hunt in Oklahoma?
Near Enid.
Yeah.
Is it how you say it? Yeah, Enid. We were up there at a buddy of ours, good old Matt Garris, out on a limb. He owns a company up that way where he does tree stands and whatnot. And basically, just from me bumping into him a couple times at different shows and reaching out to him, he invited us in. We stayed at his place. I mean, it was incredible. We all shot birds. It was unbelievable, man. What a beautiful country. You can drive an hour and be in two different worlds, two different continents.
Yeah.
It's unreal out there.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Yeah, I haven't spent a lot of time in that part of the state. That would be considered north central Oklahoma, but
correct.
Yeah, we are definitely a bit of a sportsman's paradise, man. It's we've made mention now several times of me growing up in Western Pennsylvania and lived my whole adult life in Oklahoma. I will say that it is, man, it's vastly different in Oklahoma as far as accessibility, and we just have a lot of freedoms there as sportsmen, and as well as resources. I mean, if you're a bass fisherman, my goodness, the entire eastern 2/3 of the state there's just great fishing waters everywhere, whether it's a 100-acre city lake that's a water supply lake that we're allowed to fish in, or a 100,000-acre reservoir like Texoma or Eufaula, or 50,000-acre Grand Lake of the Cherokee. We got and hunting too. I mean, same deal as you guys were fortunate enough to experience. I mean, statewide, phenomenal hunting opportunities. I think I'm not going to even pretend to be an expert whitetail guy here, but
there's some big deer down there.
We're probably one of the true quote unquote sleeper states when it comes to quality whitetails right now.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people out there right now that are making Oklahoma less of a sleeper state. They're just shooting absolute giant deer, and it's unbelievable. But I almost wonder if that whole choosing between Oklahoma or Alabama, if there was any bass fishing that played a role in that choice in your life, or if, because I'm pretty sure bass fishing in Oklahoma is not too shabby.
No, that's a great question. You're referring to when I was deciding where to go get my master's.
Correct. Or was it Louisiana? Sorry.
Auburn.
No, it was Auburn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Auburn is located in southeastern Alabama. No, the fishing really wasn't, to be honest with you. To be frank about it, that was a can't lose situation, right? If I had been basing the decision on fishing,
right,
either one would have been phenomenal. In fact, I compare those two states a bunch as being so similar. And if you track my work-related travel and my tournament coverage over the last 16 years, I don't think there's any doubt that Alabama is the state I've spent the most nights in, other than my own state. But no, the fishing didn't play a part in deciding where to go to grad school. To be real frank about it, man, at that point, I was just wanting the school to accept me and let me in, because that's part of the process. You got to have the GPA, and you got to have the entrance exam scores, and academia is stressful. So at that point, man, I just wanted somebody to say, yeah, we want you here. I mean, you're really just looking for an invitation.
Right.
No, for sure.
Somebody wants to guide your research. So
we'll
talk about that. I'll talk about that for 5 minutes. That's kind of cool stuff, man. So my master's research, I studied brush piles. You're like, what? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Really?
Yeah, the state, this is cool stuff. The state was, you'll get me on this fisheries avenue, we'll go another avenue.
Perfect. Lock them in.
Yeah. The state realized that a lot of the reservoirs they had built, obviously in the 50s and 1960s, reservoirs age pretty quickly. When you build a new reservoir, first of all, a reservoir is defined as a body of water in which man came in and built a dam. Lakes occur technically naturally, okay? In case people were wondering, because I've answered that question many times. What's the difference between a lake and a reservoir? So anyhow, a lot of reservoirs, especially in the South, were built in the 50s and 60s, some in the 40s. And when a reservoir ages over time, a lot of the habitat, all the bushes on the shoreline, the standing timber that was there when they first built the dam and flooded an area, it decays and goes away, and you lose a lot of habitat. So when I was in graduate school in the mid-late 90s, the state of Oklahoma Fisheries Division realized that we really need to start working on habitat because we've lost a lot of the natural flooded habitat in our lakes, not only where bass live, some cases where small fingerlings, go for nursery cover to grow up and be bigger bass. So they wanted to know what kind of habitat should we be sinking in these lakes, essentially. So I had 4 different study areas. I would do what we call lay down trees, where we literally cut a tree on the shoreline, let it fall, the canopy of the tree fall into the water. We would cable it off so it wouldn't go anywhere. So we had lay down trees, and then we had Christmas trees. But these Christmas tree people that come in from Michigan to sell Christmas trees in Oklahoma, and what they don't sell, they look for a way to get rid of cheap. So we would take all these Christmas trees and we would sink those. And then lastly, we would have hardwood piles, whether that was like a sycamore tree or an oak tree, certainly. Those were our hardwood piles. Fourthly, we would use control sites. What do you mean a control site? Well, we would identify just random places on the lake where we would sample. How did you sample? Well, the way we sampled was with an electrofishing boat. Okay. So,
nice.
Yeah,
we've seen those around. Those are wild.
Yeah, they are. We had habitat sites on 2 different reservoirs. One was a shallow, muddy reservoir. The other one was sort of almost a mountainous reservoir that was steep, deep, and clear. And we had these different habitat types and locations on these 2 different reservoirs. And we would go out right after the sunset into the darkness, as fish theoretically are moving shallower. And we would shock all these sites. We would electrofish all these sites. And what we determined in my study was that the habitat that held the most fish were the old Christmas trees. Okay, fish, just the most fish. I didn't say keeper fish. I'm talking little 2-inch bluegill, 5-inch largemouth. Just tons of fish would get in those Christmas trees, but seldomly would you shock up a quality 3, 4, 5 pound bass. The hardwood trees, such as the sycamores, the oaks, trees with a bunch of mature branches, that was inevitably where all the big bass wanted to be. And so now we'll get really geeky right here for a second. The question was why? You guys will dig this because it relates, real world stuff. Just like a big buck has his preferences for habitat. The reason why was because the spacing between the branches, right? So think about it. Largemouth bass are laying weight predators. They're kind of lazy by their nature.
Yeah.
So they wanted somewhere where they could, 4 pound bass could back in and not really touch the branches, but feel like he was in adequate cover to ambush shad or bluegill or whatever swam by. Well, he couldn't do that in a Christmas tree because the branches are so tight, right? And did I lose you?
No, you're good. We're just listening intently.
Yeah, we're taking notes. There's
and we got really nerdy, and we called it interstitial spacing. Like, okay, that's enough. But yeah, the space between the branches determined what fish lived in a brush pile. That's all your listeners really need to take home. And it was flat out. We proved the truth of that with an electrofishing boat. It was undisputable that bigger bass wanted to be in those big hardwood trees. They would almost never get into the old Christmas trees.
I can kind of agree with that. Just in, I guess, some of my travels over the years, thinking about it. Usually,
I know of like 3 or 4 situations where that's 100% accurate.
Yeah,
where I was standing out on top of a giant oak tree and fishing, and as I reeled it in to pull it out, this giant bass just come up and blew it up right at my feet. That's pretty interesting because then like Arthur Moraine, whatever.
Oh yeah,
there's a program there where they go out and they drop Christmas trees in the water. I mean, they tie a whole bunch together and they drop them out in the water for habitat as well. And that's usually a spot where you catch a lot of crappie and bluegill and stuff like that rather than the large bass.
Yeah.
an interesting sidebar when we were doing that study. So there was a secondary study going on where they were tagging fish at Wednesday night jackpot tournaments. They would tag bass, and they were looking to see how far those bass swam away from the release boat ramp where the little tournaments were held every Wednesday.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So one of their tagged fish, follow me here, this is wild. One of their tagged fish so happened to decide he wanted to make one of my brush piles his home.
Yeah.
So my master's research went on for 9 months. For 9 months, we shocked fish about, I can't remember, once a week, I think it was. That goofy largemouth with that tag, let's say his tag was 2468, right? So that's how you knew there was a number on the tag hanging out of his belly. That goofy sucker stayed in that one brush pile, that largemouth did, the entire duration of my 9-month study. I would shock him up at least once a week, measure him and weigh him, put him back in the water, come back a week or two later, shock him up again.
Over
And
9
literally,
months, really?
yeah, total. I mean, they're homebodies. Largemouth, very different than smallmouth. Smallmouth are nomadic. They're roamers. They're aggressive.
Yeah.
Largemouth are lazy, and that was like the epitome of that statement. Was that one? I literally watched that fish grow, guys, over 9 months. Like, let's just say when I started the first time I shocked him, he was like 16 inches.
Uh-huh.
It was like 17 inches by the end of my study, but never once left a brush
He
pile the
must have
size.
really been
Yeah.
enjoying it.
Yeah, there must have been good food
Yeah,
there.
but I could go on and on, but I've seen that in numerous studies on largemouth. When I was at Juniata College there in Pennsylvania, my senior research project, we put transmitters in the bellies of 5 largemouth on Lake Raystown, and
I mean,
we
that's
tracked
a
them.
big lake for people not familiar with there. There's I think the deepest lake in Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken, other than Kinzu.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's a big one.
It's
and I
stupid
regret I
deep.
didn't get to fish it more when I was at Juniata. Too busy studying all the time, believe it or not. But
Yeah.
anyhow, we tracked 5 bass in the fall on Raystown, Pennsylvania, and the biggest one was a 4-pounder, and she was blind in one eye, and she swam 4.2 miles in 6 weeks
Jeez.
up the lake and went into a lay-down tree. But the other 4 of the 5 that we put transmitters in, they literally swam out of the little release cove where we dumped them in the water, and I bet they didn't go 1,000 yards, found a lay-down tree, and stayed there for 6 weeks. So largemouth they're by their nature pretty lazy critters.
Yeah, that's pretty well. I mean, they do usually have like the off-limit zone by the boat launch, by where they throw all the weight in fish.
Yep.
For that reason, obviously, because you can go there the day after the tournament and put an absolute hurting on them.
Yeah, so the fish I'm joking about that we shocked up over and over for 9 months. So that's what they were actually studying. They wanted to see how far tournament released bass actually swam. And let's just, whatever the number was, let's just say they tagged 100 bass. Exactly 50%. It was like dead on 50%. Half of those fish that are released at any popular tournament ramp that are dumped right back in the lake, right at the ramp, I don't care where it is in this country, if they're largemouth, 50% of them will never go more than about 1 mile from that ramp.
Awesome.
Everybody at home listening, write that down.
I'm jotting that down as we speak here since I fish the Wednesday nighters locally here.
Yeah, Sabelli here might actually get on the podium one time.
All right, let's not get crazy here.
Well, that's why, most of the stuff like saying 528 for local folk, that's where they do the weigh-ins. The off-limit zone is pretty much that whole cove out and around. But I mean, that's where historically, if you want to catch a bass, you go near the general area of that launch and the 3 fingers that run back there, and you're going to catch bass.
We call those ABC fish. Already been caught.
Which I'm fine with. They can fit in the live well just as well as any other ones.
Yeah, ripped lips are ripped lips. I get it. But the other 50%, are you saying they made their way back to their original spot where they were caught, or just
in some cases, in some cases, and it was really cool because so we would depend on the guys fishing the Wednesday night tournament to bring us information. So if Jim, the tournament angler, he'd come to us and he would say, this was an ongoing study. Obviously, we would go out there most every Wednesday night for many, many months. And here comes Jim, the tournament angler. He'd say, hey, man, I've got a tag fish. And then we would secretly ask him to show us on the map. We had a grid laid out, his number. And he'd say, yeah, well, here's the very spot on the lake where I caught it. And then that allowed us to plot data points, right, and say, okay, here's where every tagged fish that we've re-identified, that has been re-caught, if you will, here's where it was. And then that's how we fifth grade analysis here basically said, well, 50% of these dots never went more than a mile from the ramp, and 50% of the others did. But there's tremendous credibility to the fact that fish that are being released from tournaments, whether they're small tournaments or large tournaments, same ramp. And you see this all over the country. Every reservoir has the tournament ramp, right? Where 80% of the events on that body of water go out of that spot, and the fact that largemouth don't wander very far at all away, at least half of them, it's a legit deal, and it's almost concerning. We see this at big Grand Lake of the Cherokees in Oklahoma, 50,000 acre body of water. And when the Bassmaster Classic, my worlds collide here, when the Bassmaster Classic came there in 2013, a whole lot of funding was put together at the state, local chamber of commerce, millions of dollars to build a gigantic launch ramp facility, parking lot that you could land small jets in. And fortunately, we got a great new facility. Unfortunately, there are a lot of us that believe that because that ramp has now become the tournament spot, that we really think, just total theory here, no sure way to prove this, but based on what I just shared with you about research, I mean, we really believe that it's in some ways kind of hurt the bass fishing on Grand, because fish from all over that lake, weekend after weekend after weekend for 9-10 months out of the year, are brought back to the Wolf Creek ramp. And there's a lot of us that theorize that's not necessarily been a good thing for Grand Lake.
Oh, I mean, based on what you just said, that makes sense. They're just kind of sucking the population into, a smaller area of the lake, I guess, or a different area of the lake.
Yeah, and if it's not a very conducive part of the lake with, cover and whatnot, I mean, that could definitely hurt the species as well. But I wonder if nobody's ever put the thought in with your research to say, hey, why don't we just transport these fish and drop them back somewhere else? Rotate the drop.
Yeah. And that's a great statement. And yes, I need to be clear in saying that. There are definitely some of the more responsible, larger tournament organizations, thank heavens, have invested in pontoon release boats with live tanks on the decks of the pontoons. And they, Bassmaster does that, right? Most organizations do.
See, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that at all.
They take the caught fish in a pontoon and drive, a measurable distance away from the ramp, and then literally pull a lever and release those fish. And even on Grand Lake, Oklahoma, that I referenced, there are good organizations that do exactly that. So, and we're very thankful for that. And it's all a numbers game and a frequency game, right? So, a body of water maybe in Western Pennsylvania that doesn't receive near the tournament pressure that a body of water in at Lay Lake, Alabama, or Logan Martin, Alabama, or Grand Lake, Oklahoma, Lake Texoma. I mean, where bass fishing is an absolute way of life, and every stinking weekend you've got a tournament or two, or in some cases 3 tournaments going out on that same body of water. My thoughts and theories here obviously are dependent on frequency. It's not the same on every body of water, but on those where tournament fishing is a big deal and happens every weekend, it certainly dispersing those fish or not dispersing them can have a definite effect on the overall fishery and your ability to catch them or not catch them.
Oh, I mean, that absolutely makes sense, especially if you're getting that much traffic for sure. I mean, you figure if you got like 100 angler, lineup, I mean, how many fish you think that is? I mean, it's over 100 fish, you would think, if everybody at least catches one, obviously,
right.
That's a lot of fish,
Yeah.
Dumped into
a
one
lot
area.
of our team tournaments are 200 boat events.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a silly amount of fish, especially if guys are catching bags and limits, like that's a ridiculous amount of fish, into one little area there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's an argument to be made then, why Sabelli over here hasn't reached the podium yet on a Wednesday night.
Hey, listen now. In my
hold on, let me finish.
all right. I'll let you finish burying me.
the people finishing at the top, I mean, ideally could be going to the same spot, fishing the same brush piles, catching the same kind of bass week after week. And there's consistency that those bass keep returning to that spot. I mean, there's actual science backing the fact that they could be doing something like that, where you're going out really struggling, letting everyone know where not to fish because you can't catch anything.
Listen, I'm trying to help the healthy population of boaters in this area figure out where not to go. So I'm doing my part. It's just not the most positive outcomes.
I really hope after today and after talking to Guck here that you can learn something from this. And
I'm going to go back comb through this conversation and start writing down some pointers.
I really think this is going to be a huge benefit to him in all reality, because there's actual science.
Okay, look, get yourself a 3/16 ounce shaky head. And a straight tail worm, some 10-pound test on a spinning reel, and just stay as close as you legally can for those release areas, and just tell me how that turns out when I'm back on.
Well, there's one more day left. They've gone through the regular Wednesday night routine, and now it's just the championship day here coming up September 11th, I think. So I will definitely be doing that.
Yeah.
One
Is
thing
this Lake Arthur?
Yes, and that's what I will say of all the local fishery, and
Did you hear the disdain in his voice when he said Lake Arthur?
That body of water, of all the places I've fished over the last 20 years, I will say is consistently the most difficult. Not because it's challenging in the sense that the terrain or the water is crazy. The pressure there is unbelievable. I'm sure, obviously every fishery gets pressure, but if you get there in the spring at, just after ice down and you get out there, I'll put a hurting on them every damn day. But when you start to get to spawn time and, around tournament time, it is the most brutal lake to fish, in my opinion, in our area, without a doubt.
Interesting. So where do you enjoy going the most? Give me your top one or two.
Locally, Pymatuming is probably my favorite. And then probably second would be Allegheny River.
What do you, I actually heard good things about Pymatuming not long ago from a guy back home there. What do you like about Pymatuming?
It's big enough that you can kind of get away from people, but it also has a very diverse layout, I guess would be the word. Depending on what time of year or whatever, you can get in shallow. There's enough cover to flip. There's little islands and coves you can get back in, pitch, throw a jig. When it gets hot out in the dog days, it's deep enough you can get out on some rock shoals, get after some smallmouth on a drop shot. There's lily pads. There's a little bit of everything out there.
Defined zones.
Yeah, that it's not like it. Say Lake Arthur again. You have your 1 or 2, 3 things that are kind of the go-to out there, and it's you can adjust, but it doesn't really do much for you most of the time out there, where it's kind of a numbers game. You just gotta.
Or at least we're not to the level yet where we can make that transition to get those extra bites that you need. Yeah, I'm not.
I can get bites out there, but like I said, in the the later into the season, you can catch numbers out there, but catching the keepers, those very pressured fish, like we said, that have been potentially caught once or twice already. It's a harder lake to fish for sure in that regard, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, I miss being able to fish around there some, man. Now, especially because when I left there, when I left Western Pennsylvania in general, to be honest, my bass fishing knowledge was a small fraction of what it is now. And so there's honestly been a lot of times in recent years, and as recently as this past July, a couple months ago, last month, I was in your neck of the woods. I was headed up to cover the St. Lawrence River Bassmaster Elite Series in mid-July, and I spent time on the front end of that trip in Western Pennsylvania with Mom and Dad, and then also time on the back end. And, I drove so I flew into Pittsburgh, and then I borrowed my mom's car and went up to the St. Lawrence. And so I was able to, I drove past Wilhelm and knew I was near Pymatuming.
You drove right by me, man.
And, yeah, not to be overly sentimental, man, but there's a big part of my heart and soul that just itches to just have the time, maybe in retirement or whatever, to just come back there and just sample some of those waterways that were a part of my childhood with a lot more bass fishing knowledge now 30 years later, and just truly enjoy, here we go, figuring them out.
Yep.
I would love that opportunity, man. Obviously, at this point in my life and career, I don't have the time that affords me just to come back there and kick around for a week or two. But man, when I was through there just as recently as July last month, it does, dude. It tugs at my heart to be able to get on those waterways again and figure them out.
Well, when the day finally comes, you have some contacts up here now.
Yeah. Heck yeah, dude. Yeah.
Well, we're definitely at the time limit here. I'd hate to keep you any longer. I know we said about an hour. We're like at an hour and a half now, which is, awesome talks we've had. But is there anything in closing you kind of want to throw out there that you want the folks at home to hear?
No, I'm honored, honestly. I think that's just the fact that I'm on here is a cool story into itself. We didn't know each other from Adam. Social media somewhat randomly connected us, and really a cool sentimental deal for me personally to be on a show with a bunch of guys from, as Kenny Chesney says, back where I come from. I shared that I was going to do this with my mom and dad, and just, it touched their hearts too. It's kind of a full circle deal, right? Because hunting and fishing was not a big part of the culture when I was growing up there. In other words, all my high school buddies, they were stick and ball sports guys, right? Baseball, football. And I was really kind of the outcast and a little bit misunderstood for my passion for fishing, because it just wasn't really a big part of the culture, where versus a kid that grows up in East Texas or Oklahoma or Alabama or Georgia, where fishing is absolutely a part of culture.
Yeah.
And the fact that I grew up there, I leave there 30 years ago to chase this dream, and then we find ourselves on a Saturday morning in
Full
August
circle.
22, reconnecting with some guys from right back home is just really cool. So I'm sure that a number of your listeners are from that area, and I just want them to know that I still have a sentimental connection to that area. My mom and dad are still there, and it's been a real honor to be on here with you guys.
I love it. And like I said before, I just appreciate you even answering my message whenever I tried to get a hold of you that first time.
Yeah. And people listen want to, we connected on Instagram. So I'm Guck. My name is obviously Alan McGuckin. Everybody started calling me Guck when I was in 7th grade. And literally, dudes, when I was in high school and college, professors and teachers would call on me when I'd raise my hand and go, Guck. So
I love it.
Nobody calls me Alan. So if people want to find me, if they're on social media, it's Guck, Guck, just like it sounds, Guck Fishing, Guck, Guck Fishing on Instagram.
Awesome.
We appreciate the hell out of you coming on here, and we're going to have to book one up here maybe after the Classic and kind of recap, or next year or something, but we'll definitely be in touch for sure.
Yeah, we'll make a habit of it, man. And, we went through the sort of the regimen of my normal days out here. So, yeah, mid-mornings, man. Anytime we can get Saturday mornings are a good time. So this certainly won't be the last time, and I hope it becomes even more frequent. So
awesome.
Dial me up, and just know that I'm honored to have been on with you guys.
We appreciate it, guys. As always, go like and subscribe. Check us out on our social media at Northern Outcast Outdoors and the Whitetail Distraction Podcast, which is where this episode will be streaming. Obviously, you know that if you're listening to it, but check us out, guys. We appreciate the hell out of it, guys. Alan McGuckin, the people's champ, guys.
Amazing.
Incredible.